are near. Well done, my faithful son, my precious daughter. Well done.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another service seminar here at Beaver Coach Sales and Service. We're here with Sean Lakin, our service manager, our fixed ops manager. He does a little bit of everything here at Beaver Coach Sales. Sean, how long have you been coming to this address for employment over the years?
Oh, geez, since 1993.
What a coincidence, because I was born in 92. I was wondering why we didn't hang out earlier in life.
It seems strange that we didn't know each other sooner, but you were an infant at the time.
It would have been weird. So I'm glad that things worked out the way that it did. Well, Sean is one of my good friends, and we've been working here together at Beaver Coach Sales and Service for about 6 years now together. He was here in, 5 different names or 5 different businesses under this building?
At least.
So he's seen a little bit of everything here. And with that, he's one of the guys when you call in and you have a question, which seems to happen all the time, people consider us to be a bit of an authority in the industry, not just on used Beaver RVs, but all the products that we carry. And with that, Sean's service is, dozens and dozens and dozens of phone calls a day. And what's happened is he's kind of compiled what are the frequently asked questions. And the effort here for if you're watching this and one of these questions pops up, it may be able to answer that question or help you have an understanding how to use it. Because I think what we're discovering is that a lot of people own these, don't know a lot about them from the standpoint of things that could be considered to be simple in your world, but unless you've been taught or shown this, or unless they got a really good walkthrough orientation when they purchase their RV, there's a lot of this that's up for question, and that we want to kind of shed some light on that. So, Sean, what are we doing here?
Well, right now we're in our production facility. This is going to be our meeting area / video production area. We're in construction right now. As you noticed, we don't have any windows. Well, there's windows, but there's no glass in any of them. And we're staring at some bare plywood. And no lighting installed yet, but we're working on it. So hopefully, as we come out with some more of these videos, we'll be in a little bit more completed facility. And so we're just kind of winging it today.
Yeah, that's right. You're seeing this. So what was the only unavailable or open room in the whole building?
Oh yeah,
was our unfinished conference center. So you get
Getting space here is very difficult.
That's right. Where there's no noise or everyone's working hard. So thank you for bearing with us. Well, let's just dive right into it, Sean.
Yeah, let's go.
So let's talk a little bit about before you take off. It's been a long winter here. People are getting their RVs ready for spring and ready to go on trips. Tightening RV lug nuts and checking tire pressure. What does that process look like in your world?
So as far as tightening the lug nuts, not a lot of folks have the tools that are necessary to put the amount of torque on the lug nuts to get them up to the factory specifications. I know that on a lot of vehicles you'll see small tags, or you'll see a little excerpt with an asterisk in the owner's manual that says owner's responsibility to tighten lug nuts. That is purely for liability purposes, and I don't think really anybody expects you as a consumer to put 550 to 650 foot-pounds of torque on a lug nut. We have specialized equipment that does that. It's calibrated annually or semi-annually, and that's something that we do. But the things that you can do, looking at the tire condition, checking the wear pattern, making sure that the wear pattern on the tire is even, making sure that the tire inflation is proper to either the data tag or the weight of the vehicle, and then consulting the tire manufacturer's chart. You can do those things. You can look at the sidewalls of the tire and make sure that there's no big cracks or checks in them or big chunks of tire missing. Things of that nature the average person can do. And that's kind of what you're after, is just making sure that if you're going to put your coach out on the road, that, you know, the tires are in good condition. And also there's a date code section on the tire as well. You can tell exactly when it was manufactured. By date code, most manufacturers will put your tires at a date if they're older than 6 years old. So no matter what the condition of the tire looks like, they have been breaking down from the time that they were created, and so therefore running them past 6 years could possibly put you in a bad situation.
Now, 6 years, real quick, because this comes up all the time. Is it 6 years front, 6 years rear, 6 years on the tag?
It's 6 years period.
All the way around?
Yeah, no matter the condition. Even if you put brand new tires on your coach and you go park it, you know, off in your garage somewhere, and you don't drive it for 7 years, your tires are out of date.
6 year shelf life.
So yeah, 6 year shelf life. Yeah.
Okay.
And the sun is terrible on tires, like it is on a lot of other things, like it is on your roof and your paint job and everything else. And that's why they sell these nifty little tire covers. And the primary purpose of those is basically to keep the sun off the tires so it doesn't degrade the sidewalls of the tires and accelerate basically the life cycle of your tires.
Okay, and now, do they need to rotate their tires?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a good idea. You know, I always say, you know, a good rule is every second or third oil change, you should be looking at rotating your tires.
Okay, and you figure most people either do their annual.
They're probably doing their annual,
Yeah.
so yeah, every other year,
5,000
I would rotate
miles
the
on
tires.
it,
Yep.
Yeah.
That's going to increase your tire life, you know, and then it also too exposes any issues. If you do have like a chunk of a tire missing on an inner dual, the odds of you ever seeing it are probably approaching zero. But if they break the rear axle down, pull the outside tire off, somebody's going to see it when they're doing the rotation. So
Now, from a safety standpoint, you've seen tire blowouts happen. What happens generally if a tire blows on the rear axle, either the tag or rear, and what happens when the tire blows on that front axle?
On a rear axle, on a tire that's even at zero pressure, or if it's blown, if you didn't hear it go, the odds are pretty good if the tire stayed together, you may not even know that it's bad. The only time that like an inner rear tire blowing that you'll notice it is maybe performance issues. It feels a little soft in the back end. You go into a corner, you kind of feel it drifting a little bit. That's a good indicator that maybe you've got a low tire or, you know, a damaged tire on the rear axle. If it stays together, that's it. You probably will notice some really weird wear and some really weird performance and handling characteristics. If it comes apart, you're going to hear it because it's going to beat up against the bottom of the coach and take out the wheel well and any wiring or pneumatic, you know, lines that are run for airbags and suspension and stuff like that. Very similar with the outside dual. If it goes, you know, there's going to be some, you know, airbag damage, probably wheel well damage, some of the outside body fascia damage, things of that nature. If one goes, you're probably not going to experience, you know, real heavy pulling towards the ditch or towards the center line. The vehicle will still remain fairly controllable. If you lose both of them, that's a different issue. Rarely would you ever lose both tires on the same side of a rear axle. The front is a little bit different. If you lose a front tire, you are definitely going to experience some control issues. It's going to be hard to maintain that vehicle on the road. I mean, the best thing to do is don't panic. Try to pick a good line to get out of traffic, and, you know, don't approach a steep shoulder at a hard angle, things of that nature. Try to keep the vehicle, slow it down proportionally. You know, don't panic brake, things of that nature. Things like that seem to immediately make the situation worse. There are some products out there that help with front tire blowouts. There are some steering, stabilizing and assist systems, so that the vehicle, if it blows a front tire, it won't have the effect of jerking the wheel out of your hands and pulling you into the shoulder or pulling you into the center line. Safety Plus, Steer Safe, there's a bunch of stuff out there like that. There's a product called Tyron that actually goes in and fills the gap in the rim that is necessary to mount the tire, so that if a tire does blow and loses its cap or the tread portion, the tire can't get off of the rim. So whatever's left of that tire stays with the rim, makes the unit a little bit more controllable, allows you to get out of traffic, allows you to get off the shoulder of the road without having those real drastic pulls in either direction. So that's something to think about as well.
And Shu, in our finance department, he sells a lot of that Tyron material because, I mean, it is a safety piece. And I know we're not saying this with tires to scare you, especially if you don't own an RV and you're thinking about getting one, or you currently own one and had no idea about, concerns with tire blowouts. All this is just to help educate you, to make sure that you're a safe, educated consumer when using your product, whether it's Class A, Class C motorhome. And with that said, we actually have a little clip from Shu explaining a little bit more about Tyron. So let's transition over there, and we'll be back in a minute.
Hi, today we're going to be talking about Tyron safety bands, which is a band that is designed to keep the tire on the wheel in the event of a tire blowout or tire-related issue. This is a display showing the Tyron band mounted to the tire on the wheel. Now, the way that wheels are manufactured is they all will have a depression in the rim, because you have to be able to get the bead of the tire onto the rim, because the bead of the tire is smaller than the circumference of the wheel itself. So the way that the tire is mounted once the band is on is that the bead goes in and then the tire company rolls the tire onto the rim. So in this case, this band, or this belt, allows a channel for the tire or the bead to fall into in the event of a flat. So if you're traveling down the road and you hit something in the road, have a valve stem loosen up and lose air. If you lose air pressure, the weight of the coach will push the tire down, the bead will drop into that channel, and the tire can come off the wheel. So to prevent that from happening, we mount a band inside the rim that fills that cavity. And by filling that cavity, it stands up slightly, and the bead itself will hit that band, keeps the tire on the rim, and prevents the tire from coming off. That also prevents the wheel from making contact with the asphalt. So at that point, the tire will go flat, but you can still steer, you can brake safely, and find a safe place to get off of the road. You're not always able to just pull over. Sometimes you have to drive a distance to find a safe place to exit the roadway. So that will allow you to do that without running on the rim, without creating any more damage and tearing up the coach because of a shredded tire. So if you want to look in here, I don't know if you can see it, but you'll see how that band mounts inside, and it stands up slightly so that either the bead will hit the band. If it does pop over the band, it still is high enough to where the tire will not come off the rim. So it's really designed just for safety. It doesn't make the coach perform any differently. It doesn't make it prettier. It's just inside the wheel, sleeping there, and it's there in the case of an emergency.
Awesome. So that's a really good option to put on your RV. That Tyron has saved lives before. Okay, let's transition to the next piece here. Thank you for that. Anything else on tires before we go?
No, that's that. I mean, the other component was basically alignment, and that kind of leads into tire wear and steerability.
Yeah,
and
let's
stuff.
talk about that before we jump on to the next thing.
So yeah, alignment is important. These coaches are big and heavy, and they're kind of hard to control, especially in ruts or windy conditions or accounting for the crown of the road. They'll have little pushes and pulls in this direction or that. You can tell very quickly by looking at the front tires and the rear tires if you're having issues with alignment, because they will be very evident in the tire wear. Front tires, usually if they wear on the outside, that means that the toe may be slightly excessive. You will notice more wear on the outside of the front tires because they are towed inboard. And what that does is that just gives the coach some direction going down the road. It doesn't want to push to the left. It doesn't want to push to the right. It stays pretty well centered, rides the ruts. That's what tow is for, right? If for some reason that's off, what you might see, or if the rear axle is off, what you might see is wear on the inside of one tire and the outside of another. And that's basically the coach pushing down the road, exaggerated sideways, so dog tracking the rear end, things of that nature. So yeah, just alignment real quick. If you're going to put new tires on your coach, I would put the new tires on your coach and then immediately go in and get it aligned, because that's going to save you money in the long term, because tires are very expensive.
Right.
As people that have bought some know,
Yes.
it can be $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 for a set of RV tires. So if you can prolong their life, yeah, definitely alignment's a good investment.
At the same time, I mean, what kind of shop bills have you seen in body damage of people who have not made the investment of upgrading tires? A tire has blown, it caused some damage to the RV. I mean, what have you seen that range from in costs?
Typically, front tire blowout, not counting tow bills and things of that nature,
Sure.
just in body shop and repair,
Sure.
we're anywhere from $12,000 to $15,000. Rears are a little bit less; they're $10,000 to $12,000.
And tires $6,000 to $8,000.
Right? Yeah.
So
they're a good
it's
investment.
worth making that investment. It's sometimes you look at the price of doing something and not the cost of it if you don't. And tires is a great example of that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay, great. Okay, this next one is a hot topic right now. I feel like the big space race right now is energy and how to store it and how long it lasts. So let's talk about RV batteries. There is a huge, scope of RV batteries, it seems like, and everyone's got a different opinion on how long they last and which ones are better than others. And let's just dive right into that. What's your thoughts on RV batteries? When should you look at replacing them? How long are they going to last for dry camping? Those kind of things.
So yeah, there are different types of batteries. Primarily, and probably the one that is most prevalent in the industry and the automotive industry as well, is the lead acid battery. And those basically are they're plates that are suspended in acid solution, and that's how you produce your power. Most of them in the RV industry, if you're looking at house batteries, they're serviceable, meaning that they require maintenance. You have to open the caps, check the water levels, make sure that they're properly filled, make sure that they're properly charged. And the reason that you want to make sure that they're properly charged is if you're in a cold environment and a battery is in a low state of charge, it'll freeze.
Great.
Batteries that are in a high state of charge, it takes a lot more to freeze them. In other words, the temperature has to be much, much lower in order for a fully charged battery to freeze. Freezing will damage them in that, as the water expands, as it freezes, it damages the plates, damages the connections, it'll bulge the battery cases and things of that nature. So on the flip side, you have lead acid batteries that are non-serviceable. Those are typically a starting battery. You basically, every 3 to 5 years, you're probably going to have to replace your starting battery. There are some products that you can use to make sure that they're charged throughout the season if you're storing them. There's some small standalone battery chargers, trickle chargers, to make sure that they stay up. The hardest thing on any battery, doesn't matter what kind it is to be left in a low state of charge for extended periods of time. It causes a condition called sulfation. The batteries will never really get back up to their full operating potential, and basically at that point they need to be replaced.
And we've seen that on, year-old batteries before. It doesn't matter how old they are. If they run all the way dead and you can't get them back up, they're pretty much toast. And with that lead acid, one observation I've made with it, manufacturers, when they're building these RVs, a lot of them don't consider how hard it is to get to the tops of these batteries for putting water into them. And there's a product that I know we've added on multiple RVs. You want to explain that?
Yeah, so there are different manufacturers of battery watering systems. They're pretty neat. Basically, if you can carry a space for a gallon of distilled water in your basement somewhere, you just have a little pump. If you're familiar with like an outboard motor, there's a small little ball pump, and you put the supply end into a can of distilled water. You hook up this little tube, do a quick disconnect, and then you pump it. There are some floats inside these assemblies that rise with the level of the water, and as soon as that cell has taken enough water to become full, it shuts off the supply, and then it'll fill the next one, the next one, the next one. Subsequently, when the ball becomes difficult to depress, your battery's full. Really neat product. Like Ryan was saying, access on all these things is not great. 6 standard like little U2200 batteries. They weigh like 70 pounds a piece. I mean, so you're talking about having to move hundreds of pounds of batteries in and out to service them. So yeah, it's a good idea. It's a convenience. It's definitely worth the money.
Yeah, I can see how that's definitely a big advantage, especially if you're in an awkward spot in an RV.
Yeah, and they're easy to
fill
use.
That battery. So thanks for doing that. That's a great example there.
Then secondly, the second type of batteries is going to be an AGM battery. AGM battery works on the same principle as a lead acid battery, in that it is a lead acid battery, except for the solution, the acid is suspended inside a glass material, like a fiberglass material, a mat. And so that battery does not require direct maintenance. In other words, it has no caps. You can't add water or solution to the battery at all. Basically, they'll last whatever their service life is to the degree that you take care of them. Some of the AGM batteries, you can put them into a mode through the inverter where it'll charge them at a very high rate. If there's any kind of sulfation in them, it'll get rid of it, burn it off. Lifeline batteries will allow you to do that. Some of the other manufacturers don't recommend it just because it generates a lot of heat. But AGM batteries are a good choice if maintenance, is a concern and you don't want to get into filling those batteries on a regular basis and taking care of them. You still need to watch for things like cracked cases or corroded connections or things of that nature. But for the most part, AGM batteries, if well maintained, are maintenance free.
And now when we hear deep cycle, because that comes up a lot, is that lead acid? Is that a deep cycle with gel AGM? Is it just
deep cycle is more about the construction of the battery itself. A starting battery is meant to be hit with a large load all at once for a short period of time, and then recharge rapidly. A deep cycle battery is meant to be hit with a smaller load over a more extended period of time and then be charged up less rapidly than, say, a starting battery is. So it's kind of the difference is that the deep cycle battery is like, the freight train. It's pulling the heavy load for a long distance, as opposed to like the starting battery that's, it's more like the race car. It gets hit with a big load, a lot of horsepower all at once to turn that engine over and get it started.
Is that why you see the 12 volt used for the chassis batteries and the 6 volts used for the house battery?
It's all about capacity, and the 6 volt batteries, 2 of them making a 12 volt battery, has a greater capacity for the footprint than a reasonably sized 12 volt battery does for the footprint.
Makes sense.
So more storage.
Makes sense. And then the hot topic right now with batteries is lithium. It's how long they charge, how long they run. What's some pros and cons to lithium? And are we talking like double the cost, quadruple the cost?
Yeah, lithium's what I've noticed is that there's a lot of people that are new to market, and because of that, there's a lot of a lot of people are unsure about the lithium industry because nobody's really been established in it for a really long period of time. So we don't have a track record like, with Trojan batteries or Interstate or some of these other big manufacturers. It's a well-known name. It's been out for a long time. The technology it's established
and proven.
Yeah. And so with lithium, it's a little bit different. Like, we understand the concept of why a lithium battery is great and how it works, and they maintain their voltage at a constant and steady level for a much longer period of time over the time that it takes to discharge the battery. And that's the great thing about lithium batteries, is consistency. When a lithium battery gets to a low state of charge, when it's approaching zero, the voltage drops immediately. Anybody that has a screw gun or a battery operated tool that has a lithium battery knows that battery performs at a very consistent level right up until the point that it dies, and then when it dies, it's done. You get to your last screw and it's over.
Sure.
So yeah, but the other great thing about lithium batteries is then they can be brought back to a full state of charge very rapidly. They will accept a much higher charge rate in amps and a much higher charge voltage to bring themselves back up than a lead acid or an AGM battery will. And so for those things, they're great. There are some performance issues at low temperature that most people will not experience because you just don't get them into that low of a temperature. They can be mounted inside the cab if you choose to. There's no gassing or anything like that during the charging and discharging process. Some of the downsides, before we get into downsides, another upside is weight. Like your power output to weight ratio is really high. They don't weigh much. They basically take up the footprint of a standard size battery, and only because we've standardized the size of the battery are these manufacturers building them to that size. Like the interior space that battery actually requires is much, much smaller, but because the industry has adopted certain sizes, right, they're building those batteries in those sizes, when in reality they really don't need to be that big or even that shape.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
So they're going to fit in your step well, or they're going to fit in your bay, and
right,
they have specific places in every RV where you're right, they just make it that size now.
Yeah, there's a lot of really cool stuff about them, and I'm really looking forward to when there becomes some standardization, and the technology is a little bit more established. One of the things that you can't do with a lithium battery is they do not work well as starting batteries. They do not like having large loads placed on them for very short periods of time.
Interesting.
So, yeah, because of that, you have to eliminate the start boost function on your big Class A RVs.
I remember us talking about that.
We're trying to come up with a workaround on how we can incorporate the two, because I think it's an important feature, because the starting batteries have a constant load on them that's unavoidable, and if your vehicle is parked for a long period of time without you starting it, eventually the starting battery goes dead.
And our fix for that on the lot is you hold the battery boost or the auxiliary start, and then fire it up.
Right, and so
it takes the chassis and house batteries,
ties them together. Exactly.
Gives you that oomph.
And they don't like that, and it'll damage them. So what we have to do when we install lithium batteries is basically disengage that function of the coach. And like I said, we're kind of trying to work on a workaround for that. I'm a little surprised that more people haven't addressed that issue yet, as far as they're trying to sell this product in the RV industry. So there are a lot of benefits. Not a lot of downside to lithium other than the expense. They are very expensive, but they also claim that the cycle life is much longer, and so when you go to sell your coach, if you want to take your batteries with you and install them in the next coach, then you can go ahead and do that, and they have plenty of life left.
One thing on that, just to come back to that battery boost start, which is strange because like I have in my truck, it's a little lithium emergency start deal. So instead of having to hook up jumper cables and hook it up to another car, I just hook up the jumper cables and turn on my lithium battery, and it jump starts my engine. And we have those for the bigger units on the lot, all the way up to these big diesels, and it's a lithium battery.
It is.
So how come that lithium battery works to jump start, but the lithium battery that's in your house can't draw to your chassis to make it start?
The only thing I can say is that it has to be something in the electronics package in those units that are specifically designed to jumpstart a vehicle. So as far as how that is accomplished is maybe a little bit over my head.
The YouTube videos that I've watched.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that's how you try it. Well,
we have those lithium jumpers here. I mean, we have them. They're very expensive. NOCO makes them. They're about $1,500, and they'll start a battleship in at 0 degree temperature.
It pulls the power together and gives it one big burst. But you're right, it's designed to do that.
It's designed
the ones
to do
that we're
that.
talking about for your RVs, at least not yet, Elon Musk, if you're watching this, we're counting on you. They're not doing it yet, but you're right. It's a matter of time before someone figures
Somebody
it out.
will figure. Somebody smarter than me will figure it out.
Slightly smarter than the two of us. So, okay, that's good. Now, you talked about the makeup of a lead-acid battery. It's got lead plates, water in it, the glass mat, deep cycle batteries. It's in that glass material. What is the makeup of a lithium?
If you ever opened up a lithium battery, what it is it is a multitude of small individual cells that are in series parallel circuits to create a certain predetermined voltage. So it looks like a battery pack. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the old lantern batteries that we used to get that had the little coily wires. I remember when I was a kid, we used to use them to launch our model rockets. And so, yeah, they're kind of like when you open one of those up, what was inside of them looked like a whole bunch of AA or AAA batteries. It was a large rectangular battery with just a multitude of little batteries in it. Kind of the same thing with these lithium batteries. You open the case up, and there's just a whole lot of little lithium cells in there stacked on top of each other.
Normally, what, 100 cells, 170 cells?
However many it takes them to get to the amp hour rating that they're looking for and the weight that they're looking for that fits in the package. So that's kind of the cool thing is, they're only really limited by the amount of space that they occupy and the amp hour rating of the individual cells. So however many they can fit in there comfortably.
Wow.
And that's why companies like Zamp is coming out with some oddly shaped battery packs that don't fit the traditional footprint, have a much higher amp hour rating, and then you can put them in your base. I think it's kind of similar to like what Tesla does with a lot of their batteries, and they're going into the residential application for battery storage or for energy storage. And it's basically like a wall, and you have these cartridges that are the power cells, and you can insert them as you want to grow your capacity. You can add to them. So I think the RV industry is gonna head that way. But I think the biggest thing is everything follows the automotive industry.
Yep.
And the RV industry is about 10 years behind everything that the automotive industry does. So as it becomes standard practice in the automotive industry, the RV industry will follow.
I think that's a safe bet.
Yeah.
I think we touched really well on that. I think the last point I frequently asked question is, when you're storing your batteries for any of those three, do you recommend a battery tender or just completely removing the battery? What do you recommend people do?
Battery tender is definitely the least invasive. They're very easy to install in that it's usually a positive connection and a negative connection on the house, and a positive connection and a negative connection on the chassis, and that's it. Removal of the batteries, I don't recommend unless you
really know what
you're doing. And even having years of replacing batteries, upgrading batteries, I always draw a picture. I always mark the cables, and I always take a picture with my phone. Excuse me. Just to ensure that when I put the cables back on the battery, they go in the correct place. I couldn't even tell you how many times in a week I have somebody call me that tell me that they were just replaced their batteries. They put them in exactly how they came out, and now all these things don't work.
Yeah.
And clearly they didn't put them all the cables back where they belonged, and now they're having trouble. And the problem is sometimes if you put something to ground that shouldn't be grounded, or you put power to something that should be grounded, you're going to take out circuit protection. Now, circuit protection in a motorhome could be anywhere in that 440 to 500 and some odd square foot package. And then sometimes it can be difficult to locate. Sometimes manufacturers don't always put it in the same place. So I would recommend, just being ultra careful, marking all your wires, draw yourself a picture, take yourself a picture before you even think about loosening a single nut on top of the battery pack.
That's really good. And if you're doing your yearly maintenance on it, if you're getting a oil change or whatever, use that opportunity to ask your technician too. If you don't know, look it up and ask. And I think we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
So, Sean, let's move on here to Wastewater System in your RV. I know a lot of people where this probably stems from is it's wintertime. It's up here in the Northwest. It obviously gets very cold. You don't want systems to freeze in the RV. So you winterize your unit. Then you go to de-winterize, and the question is this pink fluid that we're putting in it, is this safe to drink? What is the process, and why we use the chemicals that we do to winterize an RV? And what is the process for de-winterizing your RV?
So, I mean, the process to winterize an RV completely depends on your RV, because not all
Sure.
vehicles have washers and dryers, dishwashers, and so on and so forth.
Aqua
But
hots.
aqua hots. The basics being, what does it take to properly drain the system? And that's basically opening all your low point drains. What I usually start with would be pressurized air. Make sure you're blowing out all the lines. Open all the low points. Make sure that the freshwater tank is completely drained. Remove the filters if you have filters, whether they be for ice maker, whole house, or whatever the case may be. What I usually do is take the filters out and put them in an open plastic bag in the sink where they can dry out. And if you choose to reuse them, if not, that's a good time just to once a year change your water filters out so you don't get anything growing in your water system. Basically for the freshwater side, that's kind of it. If you have an appliance you have to winterize, like a dishwasher, you pour some of the propylene glycol into the system, you put it into a condition where it's going to rinse and pump the system dry, and it'll pull it through the impeller, fill the pump, and then you don't have to worry about it freezing. Same thing with the washer dryer. You just put it into a condition where it'll drain and spin. It pulls it through the pump and it'll pump some of it down into the P-trap, and then you pretty much essentially winterized your washing machine. Water heaters, basically you pull the plug, drain the system. If you have a bypass, that's a good time to set the bypass into the bypass position so that water, air, or RV antifreeze, should you choose to pump it through, does not try to fill the water heater up to its capacity, 5 or 10 gallons or whatever it may be. An aqua hot, they do require that you put propylene glycol into the coil for the hot water production on the aqua hot. So basically the way you do that, you can go to the water pump, disconnect the input side, and run it into a gallon container, open up the nearest hot side faucet, and once you see pink coming out of it with the pump activated, then your aqua hot is winterized. So yeah, other than that, that's pretty much it on the freshwater side. And then on the wastewater side, with the gray system, make sure your black tank's dumped, make sure your gray tank's dumped. And then what I do is pour a little bit of RV antifreeze into each one of the sinks. That'll fill up the P-traps and ensure that they displace any water that was in there so that you don't get any freezing of your drain pipes. Usually a gallon down the toilet. And so what that does is, with the valves closed, is it backs up against the valves and basically ensures that any water that was left in the system isn't going to be up against the valves and the discharge plumbing and cause it to rupture. We see that quite a bit in the springtime. People, that's when like the damage that was done over the winter becomes apparent when people try to de-winterize their coach and go out and use it for the first time, and all their fresh water stuff leaks. Their water heater's got a crack in it, and all the wastewater's pouring out the bottom of the coach, and
what could it cost?
It becomes a big deal and costs thousands of dollars.
You have to redo plumbing on an RV.
Oh yeah, and improperly winterized aqua hot will cost you between $10,000 and $12,000.
Yeah, that's another just preventative maintenance of ownership of an RV. You got to make sure and keep an eye on the weather. And as an alternative, so that's if you're really storing it, right? If you're using it through the winter, if you're living in it, is it just running all the systems and keeping water moving through it that's going to prevent that? Or even then you should consider it?
I mean, if you had to live in your RV in inclement temperatures, which last week, for those of you who weren't aware, Texas had a huge nasty snowstorm, and we were inundated with phone calls about furnaces, about people that never had to worry about winterizing their motorhome or worry about things breaking, pipes freezing, stuff like that. Suddenly we're very concerned about it, and rightfully so. And so we took a lot of questions, fielded a lot of questions, and right along these lines. So if you're going to live in your coach in extreme conditions, and I'm talking about where it's going to get below 0 at night, below 10 degrees at night. Most of these units were not meant for those kinds of temperatures.
They're meant for people to hop in them and chase after the sun, right?
Right, exactly.
So.
You point your wheels in a direction where it's sunny and step on the gas.
That's right.
But in these cases where these people couldn't do that because down trees, power lines, things of that nature,
right,
it becomes essential to make sure that, first of all, you're carrying a decent supply of fuel. Your aqua-hot system, if your coach is so equipped, will not operate below a quarter of a tank. Neither will your generator, and it's done that way by design so that if for some reason you ran yourself low on fuel, you would still be able to start your engine and go get more. So propane, similar. Make sure your propane tanks are topped up and whatnot, because you're going to have to run your furnace all the time.
Yeah.
There's really no option for not running the furnace. So basically, set your thermostat to at least 60 degrees, whether you're going to be in the coach or not. If you choose to leave at any point during the day and leave your coach alone, set it to at least 60 degrees. If you have the opportunity, if it's going to be in the same place for long enough, to block in or insulate the bottom of the coach so that wind cannot, the air can't freely pass back and forth under the coach, because that'll sap a lot of the heat energy that you're producing, then you should do that. Small ceramic heaters, if you have access to 110 volt power, and you can clear out a large enough area inside the cargo bay, and set that thing down to like 50-60 degrees so it's coming on now and again, that most likely will help keep your black and gray and your fresh tanks and your water lines and stuff like that from freezing. Open up a cabinet door under a sink if you're worried about pipes freezing, just so some of that warm air can get under there and circulate and keep those things thawed out. Now, in the most extreme of conditions, like let's say that you want to take your coach skiing for the weekend, which I've done extended elk hunting trips and things like that where it was below 0 at night, and some ski trips up to the mountain here locally.
I was at the mountain this weekend, and it was packed with RVs. I mean, absolutely packed in the parking lot.
Yeah, and
so people do it.
I don't know how they're doing it, but how I did it was I would buy a 5-gallon case of RV antifreeze. You're not taking a shower because you don't want water in your waste tanks, and you don't want water in your fresh tank or any of your pipes and whatnot. So basically, I would take the RV antifreeze, put it in the shower, and use that to flush the toilet.
There you go.
And so you can still use your toilet. You're not adding anything that's going to freeze into the system, basically. And then up by the sink, so it's up off the floor, I'd get a couple of the 2.5-gallon water jugs that have the little dispenser on it. If you want hot water, you boil it. Obviously, you're not going to take a shower or anything like that with it. But, at least you have hot water, hot cocoa, coffee, whatever. You can cook your food in there and whatnot. And it's pretty comfortable until you get to getting a little ripe after.
Until you need a shower.
Until you need a shower. But most of those places, they have a shower that's available, so it doesn't become a huge issue. And that's only the most extreme.
Yeah, and if you do it differently, if you're going up to the mountain on the weekends and you do a different system, we'd like to know. So I'll put it in the comments below this video, and I'm curious to see what kind of responses that we'll get from that. But yeah, very cool. I know with that then, so we're winterizing it, we're keeping the unit safe. It's time to de-winterize. People are very concerned about safety of that pink fluid, and what does that process look like? You got the ice maker you got to clear out. How do we at Beaver Coach Sales de-winterize a unit for a customer?
Basically, it just involves going in and closing all the low point drains off. Going in, taking the water heater out of its bypass mode, putting all the filters back into place, putting fresh water back into the system, getting everything pressurized, checking the function of all the appliances, making sure that we don't have any leaks, things of that nature. And then as far as the winterization solution is concerned, the propylene glycol is non-toxic. I mean, essentially, you could drink it. It's going to give you a bellyache and probably some other side effects we won't get into, but
please see your doctor before drinking.
It's not going to kill you. It tastes bad. I usually throw out the first 3 or 4 batches of ice that'll come out of the ice maker. Run a gallon or 2 of water through the refrigerator just to make sure that on the fresh water dispenser side, if you have if you have one, that you're not getting any more pink stuff out and just pour it down the drain. It's not gonna hurt you. It doesn't hurt the water pump. It doesn't hurt any of the features of any of the appliance that it comes in contact with. So it's pretty safe stuff.
That's good.
There are different grades of RV antifreeze. The only thing I can say is, try to stay away from the alcohol-based ones and try to stay into the propylene glycol-based ones.
Whatever your favorite flavor is.
Right. It's all pink, but I've never tasted it to see if there was a difference in taste.
Should we do a video? Should we do a blind taste test? Maybe we'll talk to our producer and see if that's something we could put together.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. So with that last note on that, if customers are concerned from a sanitation standpoint, maybe it's not just after de-winterizing and all that, but it's actually traveling around to different RV parks. You don't know. Up here in the Northwest, we got a lot of mountain water, and
it's good water.
It's all good stuff up here. Other places, you might go into cities and don't like the chlorine taste or whatever. What are some good sanitation methods for your house water system?
I would say if that's a concern, primarily I would get a large standalone water filter that goes in between the water spigot and your coach. So basically you're filtering the water that you're putting in your tank. I know that on many occasions we have contamination that could be due to biological agents.
Sure.
It could be due to sedimentation, or it could be due to chemicals that, whatever that municipality is, adds into the water system.
Mm-hmm.
There are different levels of filtration, from osmosis back to just different levels of like micron that'll filter out different types of materials. And then there are some that just basically kind of clean up the taste and whatnot, and those are mostly like your charcoal filters and whatnot. But so it just kind of depends on how sensitive you are to those kinds of things, what kind of water you think you're going to be putting in your tank. Just kind of depends on what type of a filter system you're going to install in your coach. But it's never a bad idea to have just a standalone water filter that goes between the faucet and the coach. It's not going to really restrict your water flow or anything like that, and it's a good preventative measure to make sure you don't get algae and things like that growing in your water.
And we see a lot of those as well.
Oh yeah, every summer we get issues when primarily the first complaint is that somebody has restricted flow, and it's usually on the operation of the pump side, and sometimes it's on city water as well, just depending on how the filters are inserted. And then we'll pull the filters out, and they're literally green and furry. Like it's it looks like the stuff that you find in the river that you definitely don't want to drink, and it has a very strong smell.
That's gross.
Yeah.
You're like, no wonder your water tasted funny.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just for $50, you can probably save yourself a lot of heartache and throw a filter on it.
Now, how often should it be replaced? Because they do come with house filters. The majority. I don't know what RVs don't, but
at the very least, I'd say annually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. That's what I needed. Now there's a filter for the refrigerator and a filter for the whole house. Same thing with the fridge. Just replace them both.
I would do them annually.
$10-$16, something like that.
Some of the refrigerator types that are actually made by the manufacturer, they're a little bit more expensive, but it's worth it.
It's worth it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's really good. Our house, in our fridge in our house, it's got that light that comes on that says replace, and then all you have to do is just reset it, and then the light stays away for about a year, and then it comes on again.
Mine does the same thing.
It's the weirdest thing.
4 or 5 times.
Yeah, our water's starting to taste. I might have some of that green stuff building up. I'll check that. Okay, well, I think that's pretty good. If you have any more questions that need some follow-up, or write in the comments about any kind of sanitation, any of the things that we've listed so far here, but specifically with sanitation on the RV. If you're using a reverse osmosis system, if you're using a filter that you like, send a picture or a link below. We'd love to check it out. Next up, we have brakes. Let's take a break for a minute here and talk about brakes.
Excellent.
So with your RV, I mean, are they gonna squeak really loud like your car? Is that how you know that you need brakes? Is it part of the yearly check-in? How do you determine when you need brakes, and how does a customer know? Besides the obvious, running through a stoplight without
I would say reduced braking ability would be primary. What's the first indicator? Yeah, I mean, I don't know how some of these systems get to the point they do when we find them, how there couldn't have been indicators previous to.
Sure.
The only thing I can think is that the braking ability was lost so gradually over such a long period of time that the operator didn't notice.
As in, you just have to push a little harder,
right,
a
just
little harder,
takes a
little
little
harder on the
longer,
brakes.
and a couple feet becomes 100 feet, and
Yeah.
over time. So, because I don't think anybody's intentionally going out there and maliciously not having their brakes
Right.
looked at because they just don't want to have them fixed, or they're intentionally endangering anybody. But I have seen every season since I've been doing this, somebody will come in and 90% of a rotor is missing.
Oh,
That you'll
I know.
have.
I've seen some nasty ones back
Oh
there.
yeah, large chunks are just missing. They're just not even there. They have become molten material at one time and been thrown off into the frame rail. I've seen that cause fires. We used to have a system called Meritor Wabco back in the early 2000s that were infamous for not having the proper brake proportion for front to rear. They usually are 60 front at least and 40 on the rear, and they didn't have the proper brake cans in the front, and so the rear was doing all the work, and the rear got hot and got molten, was throwing molten material into the frame rails. So it's real. It happens.
No joke.
You definitely want to be at least looking at them, doing a visual inspection at least once a year. If you have somebody going under there to do an oil change, just make sure while your technician's under the coach that they're inspecting the brakes. There's if you look at a rotor, there are going to be some key indicators that you've had some heat issues. One of them is bluing, discoloration. They should kind of be a shiny and consistent silver tone. If you see reds and blues and bright colors and stuff like that, you're having some thermal issues. They got hot. You may not always smell it. The rear brakes are a long ways from the cab. You might not smell them when they're getting hot, so that's not always the best indicator. Then you have what we call checking. Checking are small cracks in just the surface area. Basically, it's the contact area of the rotor. They don't penetrate all the way through the rotor material, so they're not really compromising it at that point. It's just an indicator that you've had some heat issues. Those rotors are probably original, or they're fairly old. And at that point, it's not an emergency to get them replaced. But I mean, at that point, I would say you need to take a good hard look at them and make sure that those cracks don't go all the way through. And then we have what we call cracking. And basically, it's pretty self-explanatory. There's a crack that penetrates all the way through the surface area and all the way to the backer, and it's completely through. And if you shine a flashlight up against it, you're going to see daylight, out the other side. That's serious. At that point, it is definitely time to replace your rotors. Pad thicknesses vary, so it's very difficult to say, what percentage of pad do I have left? Different manufacturers have different specifications for, the pads when they come out of the box. Some of them are a half an inch thick, some of them are an inch and a half thick. You have to know what you're looking at in order to know what the percentage of brake is left.
What's your policy with the boys in the back here? Do you have them check on every RV when it comes in? Is that part of your 14-point inspection, or
when there's an oil change, that's part of the 14-point inspection. I mean, it's in our best interest, in the customer's best interest, to check those units as they come in. It's I'm not to the point where I'm forcing guys to get under and look at brakes, right. But we like to do an under chassis inspection on every coach that comes in, and that's not necessarily. I mean, part of it obviously is we're trying to generate some work for the shop, but we're not selling somebody something that they don't need. I'm not going to look under there and go, hey, your brakes are checked, you need to replace them right now. I'll tell you that they're checked and that you need to continue to monitor them. And if that checking becomes worse, or if it turns into some cracks that go all the way through, you definitely need to get it addressed. So it's not we're not going to hold you hostage. If your brakes are serviceable, we'll let you know. If they're not, we'll let you know. If they're bad enough and you still choose to leave, I'm probably going to have you sign a waiver saying that we informed you that your brakes were at a dangerous level. But exactly. I think the biggest thing though that a lot of people miss and we haven't touched on yet is brakes are a wear item. So the more you use them, obviously the faster they're going to go away. And so the way that you can avoid that, for one, is don't put yourself into situations where you're going to have to do a lot of heavy panic braking.
Right.
Then
Nebraska.
Then, yeah.
There, don't leave.
Secondly, use your auxiliary brakes. Like, use your Jake brake in cases when you don't even think you're going to need it. We can get a set of rotors up to about 900 degrees Fahrenheit and about 3 or 4 just regular highway stops out here on the highway. You don't think.
64,000 pounds fully loaded on some of these 45-footers.
Yeah, and they don't have any recovery time because you go to a red light and you have to hammer the brakes, and then you take off again, and a quarter mile down the road you have another light, and so there's not enough time in between your normal braking to allow all that heat to dissipate and allow the rotor to cool back down. Like, will it take it? Yeah. Is it bad for it? Yeah. You're probably going to catch that smell most of the time that indicates your brakes are hot when you're in town. I would say the only condition that I don't have at least the auxiliary brake in the low position is if I got the cruise control on and I'm going down the highway.
And even then, cruise control is going to overpower your auxiliary brake. So if your auxiliary brake is on, or your Jake brake or engine brake, if it's on and you got cruise control will stay on until you disengage cruise control, and then you'll remember that it's on because it'll engage and you'll feel that kind of it pulling you back and the engine working against itself to allow that. But man, there's been times on trips, especially I go down south, where I drive miles and miles and miles and miles. I never tap my brakes until I'm actually ready to stop, because those engine brakes will slow you down to 15 miles per hour before they disengage.
Oh yeah, I've felt
15
some.
miles per hour, you're able to use your regular brakes just fine.
Some of them are so effective you feel like you're going to get thrown through the windshield especially when they're in high. So they work really well.
That's Hoodoo when we're headed over to like Sweet Home for the Country Music Festival or whatever. On that steep grade, you just flip it in high on a couple of these that have 2-stage, and it's amazing how much those slow you down. By the time you hit that steep corner, you're still not even using your brake yet on a 54,000 pound rig.
Yeah, I never turn it off on that entire trip. Yeah. I never turn the auxiliary brake off.
That's good. Okay. And now, what's the difference for people who don't know between disc brakes and drum brakes? And how long do they last?
Basically, I mean, I have found that the drum brakes tend to last longer. Generally, the components have a much higher content as far as materials concerned. They're much more robust. The friction surfaces are larger in surface area and thickness. The drums are much heavier, much more material. So yeah, I mean, that's generally speaking. Drum brakes will probably last longer. More likely under super heavy loads, you're going to get less residual heat from a drum brake, because all of that metal just acts like a giant heat sink. There's a much larger area for it to dissipate. On the RV side, on the automotive side, it's a little bit different design. The disc brakes, they use them because you don't get as much fade. They recover quicker, things of that nature. The ABS systems are a little bit quicker to respond. But overall, I think most manufacturers, for the most part, they're running disc brakes. Some of them run drum brakes on certain chassis. There's really technology is advanced to the point where there's not really a super enormous advantage over running disc over drum. Either way is good stuff.
Why do you see disc brakes on the rear and drum on the front, or vice versa on RVs?
What we used to see was a lot of, if you had drum brakes, they were either on all 4 corners or they're on the rear, and that was pretty much it. Yeah, I think that's mostly because they're counting on that large surface area, the large amount of material, and being able to deal with large amounts of stress and large amounts of heat and slow that big vehicle down for longer periods of time than the disc. I mean, now the disc brakes, the technology on the RV side anyway is advanced to the point where it used to be that people would not. We had customers that adamantly would not want disc brakes on their coaches. Yeah. And that was just, I think it's more of a personal preference thing, and that was based on the past history. You know, the disc brakes were not always maybe engineered or had the experience out on the road, and then people were kind of wary of it. It's like, oh, it's something new. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be the first. Nobody ever wants to be the first to go. So yeah, I think that was a big part of it, was just the stigma, but I don't think that it's not reflected in reality.
Sure.
Definitely I wouldn't shy away from driving a rig that's got 4 disc brakes anymore.
Now and when we're talking about engine brake and exhaust brake, we're talking about diesel pushers.
Right.
What does air brake mean? Because we talk about air ride and air braking system with diesels. If you have a gas RV,
like the different systems of actuation, like
right.
So you either have hydraulic, you have air over hydraulic, or you have air actuated. Air is basically direct chassis air is actuating the brake system. It's running off of the air compressor, which runs off the brake tank, which runs off of the brake pedal assembly. Hydraulic, air over hydraulic, is similar, other than it uses an air canister to actuate a brake master cylinder. That's similar to like what's in a car. So it's not actuated direct off the brake pedal, because diesels don't generate vacuum like a gasoline engine does. It's basically, that's your power brake booster, is that air canister. And then straight hydraulic typically uses a 12-volt actuated pump system, and your brake pedal is kind of like actuating a switch, and that turns on a pump builds pressure, and it sends that pressure back to all 4 corners, and that's what stops your vehicle. As far as efficiency of operation, straight air is the best. Air over hydraulic is the next preferential, and then straight hydraulic afterwards. Usually the straight hydraulic coaches, you can kind of tell, you get a little bit softer feel. They don't brake as hard, but yeah, I mean, it works, and they've been using it for a long time.
Now, we talked about like the exhaust brake for diesel pushers and gas coaches. What blows me away is like driving up to the lakes, and we take some Class C's here and go up to the lakes in the summertime with friends and family, and I always put it on tow haul and braking down the hill. How does that system work? Because I'm blown away by just how well they brake going down the hill, and kind of holds at whatever speed you're at in that tow haul mode. What's going on there? Why is that?
Usually in the tow haul mode, what it's doing is if you have an overdrive transmission, which is basically like kind of a gear in between the gears, it just eliminates that. So basically, you're staying in those gears for longer periods of time. So you're
it holds that no.
Yeah. Yeah, and some of that's in the modern transmissions are all electronically controlled, and so basically it's set in the parameters that it's going to keep you under a certain percentage of load or at a certain RPM in a certain gear.
Got it.
And so so that's how it maintains. Like if you're hauling a heavy load, put it in the tow haul mode. If you have the ability to knock 6 gear out of the top end or something like that, especially if you're trying to descend a hill, you can downshift, and that'll help as well.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And then last is with tow vehicles. Because most people have a tow vehicle with them. What kind of braking systems are available for your tow vehicle? What kind of systems do you recommend? What does that look like?
Most states at this point don't require you to have a dinghy tow car rigged up for brakes. Some of them do. There's this really cool brightly colored map of the United States and Canada that tells you exactly which states required and under what circumstances.
What's that one? There's one state that has no color on it.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe they're undecided.
If Jared's able to find that map, here it is right now.
And it changes every year.
I'm going to put some work for our producer Jared on this.
So that basically indicates where it's required. And the different systems some of them are active off the coach. So in other words, you depress the brake pedal, you use a line that comes off of the brake canister back to the back bumper, and then it goes out to the dinghy. So then it basically actuates an air-driven cylinder which pushes directly on the pedal. That's the Brake Master system by Roadmaster. Works that way, and there's a couple other ones out there that do too. Then there's a different type of system. Like, let's say that you like that system and your tow car already has it, and you buy a coach that has hydraulic. They make a kit that you can install that works off of hydraulic brake pressure, activates a switch, and then that activates a compressor, which basically does the same thing. It depresses the brake pedal and causes you to stop. Then they have some electric versions like the Brake Buddy, where it's like a little suitcase guy and it drops in between the driver's seat and the brake pedal, and when it sees a brake signal, it pushes on the pedal, and that's what actuates the system. There's another one that I like that's called the Invisibrake, and the reason I like it isn't necessarily because it's easier for us to install or that it's or that it's invisible, but the way that it works is kind of cool in that it has its own little internal system that you can adjust the pressure on. When it sees a brake pedal signal, it applies pressure to the brake pedal, and it's kind of stashed underneath a seat or where the spare tire goes, or wherever you can find the best place for it. And it has a pulley system, and it pulls against the pedal and pulls it towards the firewall, and that's what actuates the brakes. Neat thing about that one is that it doesn't matter what kind of brake system the coach has, the car works the same. And so there's no taking parts out or putting parts in or anything like that. Once it's adjusted and set up and installed, you're done. The only caveat being that you may have to unhook it if you have adjustable pedals in your car, or it can cause some issues. But other than that, it's a pretty bulletproof system. Yeah.
So, Brake Buddy, Invisibrake,
Air Force One system is really good. It works off of the coach as well. So anything that has air brakes, and a lot of them are pre-rigged for them. The towing vehicle usually has a small canister that will work as like a breakaway system. If something happens with coach brakes, it'll still be able to actuate the tow vehicle brakes and safely bring it to a stop.
So those three, I just want to make sure I got them right. We got Invisibrake, Brake Buddy, Air Force One. What was the other one?
The Invisibrake.
Are these the three that we sell?
Those are probably the ones that we sell the most of. Yeah. We used to have one that was very, very popular called the M&G brake system, and that worked off of the air system off of the coach as well. But a lot of the vehicles now, what happened essentially is that the automotive manufacturers started building the engine compartments into such a condensed form that there simply wasn't room for it anymore, because it went in between the brake booster and the master cylinder. It was a really great idea, super simple, pretty much bulletproof once you got it all set up. And it made no discernible difference in the coach braking. It was very easy just to hook and unhook an airline, and then everybody just kind of redesigned the cars, and it's not applicable for as many units as it used to be.
Well, what I'll do is let's just put up some pricing here for those three systems that we sell the most of. That way you get an idea what those kind of look like. And installation is an estimate, so for the labor cost on that, it's going to be, give or take 10%, right?
It totally depends on the vehicle. Some of them are pretty straightforward. Some of them are nightmares. Frankly, rigging some vehicles to tow requires removal of all of the fascia, the front fenders, the headlight assembly, the grille, and it's kind of shocking. I don't recommend you come down when we're in the middle of it, because you won't. It's like waking up in the middle of surgery. Nobody wants to see that.
Well, great. Well, those are some of the top 5 in no particular order questions that come up again and again with RV owners. We have another 5 questions that we'll jump into at a following video from this, but this is a good amount of time here. Been about an hour giving 5 of those, so stay tuned. If you have any questions or anything that we didn't mention here, let's make sure to write it in the comments below, and we can get that. But just a little sneak peek for what we're going to talk about in our next service seminar. where I go over clean and treat your slide outs and seals, what that looks like, changing your oil, recommendation for miles and what kind of oil to use there, replacement filters, maintain your awning, what that looks like and that process is, and tow vehicle electrical systems. So anyway, if you have questions on those, stick around and be looking for that video.